Thank you very much, Chairman. I want to thank Lenoria Walk and the Department of Affirmative Action for giving me an opportunity to have just a few brief words today. Before I go any further, I would like to publicly acknowledge and give my thanks and appreciation, I think all of us should, to Mayor Lanier for both his commitment to the principles and ideals of inclusion and diversity that have been manifest by virtue of this program, and his leadership skills in terms of being able to bring this community together and the political support necessary to establish it. I really want to thank you, Mayor Lanier. I know he's gone, but we need to, there's an old saying in the community that you don't miss your water till the well runs dry. And if you've been involved in public life and been watching elected officials, you will know that Mayor Lanier is more than a little bit rare among elected officials around the country and mayors in major cities. So I think even in his absence, we should give him another round of applause. I've been asked to just say a word about the time and what must be done. And I think that I don't too often get an opportunity to speak is because sometimes I say what some are afraid to think. I think it's time we really address things the way they really are and tell it like a TIS is. Things are not going well in the city of Houston for people who believe, as we do, is that everybody should have an opportunity for a share of the pie. Not only are things not going well in Houston, they're not going well around the country. The progressive forces, the forces that seek to include and give everybody an equal opportunity and a fair share of the opportunity to earn wealth in this country, are losing. And it's really nothing surprising or new. There's a saying that we have in the movement, the civil rights movement, the human rights movement, called a luta continua. It means the struggle continues. The struggle continues. The struggle is never over. And I see that from time to time people begin to celebrate. Amir Cabral said, tell no lies and claim no easy victories. And because you have a progressive mayor or you have someone elected to a position or you manage to meet a certain benchmark or goal with regard to minority participation, you begin to pat yourselves on the back and say how well we've done. When the reality for the most of our people, most African American families, most Hispanic families, is that they're locked into poverty, and that their reality really has not changed. And that if you look at the projection from all the economists and the sociologists and those who study the way of the world and the ways this society is developing, they will tell you that very likely we are in the midst of creating a permanent underclass. A permanent underclass, people locked into poverty who will never be able to earn their way out, no matter how much work they put forward, no matter how much they put into going to school, working on a job, and saving money. Most of those people in the permanent underclass look like me, look like Sherman, look like Councilmember Castillo, and yes, some of them are also Anglo, and they're locked in that situation as well. Affirmative Action was a program that hoped and helped to address that. But not only that, affirmative action also addresses not just past discrimination, like all discrimination is in the past, but everyday ongoing discrimination that's going on right now today in Houston, Texas, and around the country. And I think we've got to say that. We've got to stop apologizing for affirmative action and affirmative action programs like somebody's giving us something. The evolution to affirmative action programs comes after struggle from a people who've been locked out continuously and are continued to be locked out, saying and securing some measure of some kind of program that provides some redress for that kind of grievance. I agree with the mayor. It is in the self-interest, not just of those who are locked out, but for those who are wise and those who are smart, it's in the interest of the entire community. Because of the way the leadership of this city has been able to work at and work on some of these challenges we haven't had riots like they've had in Los Angeles. We haven't had some of the kinds of ongoing racial tension and strife that they've had in New York and in Chicago. But it's not that it can't happen here, it simply has not happened here because of how we as a community have responded. But every day, there's a continuing test and challenge to the everyday ongoing issues. What's happening in our own city? Well, They spoke a little bit about the Metropolitan Transit Authority program, the NTA program. Some of us don't think they should have abandoned their program voluntarily. You know, Martin Luther King said, I come out of the tradition of civil disobedience. I come out of the tradition of challenge and protest. Martin believed that there's some laws that are just unjust and you ought not obey them. You ought to just be declared disrespectful of the court. Because I don't respect every law that man makes. I respect all the laws that God makes. But the MTA voluntarily gave up their program. What was the result of that? Well, the result of that is literally, virtually no minorities, subs, have received any money from the primes on the contract since they went to a voluntary program. That's how much good faith we've seen from the prime contractors at Metro. And I hope there's some people from the Houston Contractors Association in the room, because I feel that you betrayed the good faith that we had when we met with the Houston Contractors Association and the general contractors and the prime contractors said, let's work out a program that works for everybody in this community. And I know they like to basically stand back and say, well, this is not the association. These are some members. We don't have any influence. We don't have some control. I call everybody to account and say that all of us have to exert some leadership, because that's what happens to us when folks in the African American community, some people that they like to call radical, you know, I used to be known by that title before I was elected to council. They go to the NAACP, they go to the Urban League, they go to the so-called Main Street and say, we want you to repudiate. We want you to repudiate that radical element. We want you to say that they are wrong, that they're not in the same vein as the rest of the people are. I haven't heard any primary contractors. I haven't heard the Houston Contractors Association. I haven't heard the general contractors say anything in support of the affirmative action program at the city and with Metro. And it's time that their voices be heard. A lot of folks always like to lift up Martin Luther King, and it's interesting when your enemy raises up your hero and tries to confuse us. We saw that kind of language confusion with the Proposition A, which sounded like it was protecting the interests of taxpayers. Now we got the same thing rolling out with Proposition 209. We're going to put in a clause that eliminates discrimination or consideration of race in any aspect of programming by the state or by the government. And then people who don't read, who don't study, who don't understand says, well, yeah, I'm for non-discrimination, and they vote for it and eliminate the affirmative action program. Just as we challenge folks in the African American community to say, yes, white women have been discriminated against as well as African Americans, as well as Hispanics, as well as Asians, then also Anglo women need to challenge Anglo men and prime contractors and stand up for the affirmative action program. If we don't, it will be eliminated. It will be eliminated. There won't be any dinners and lunches like this where we're celebrating an increasing amount of business that's gone to minority contractors. What happened in the Hopwood case at the University of Texas Law School? I went to the University of Texas. In 1969, I was one of 200 African American students out of 40,000 Anglos. You talking about cultural oppression. I know what it's like. I was there when the football team was all white, before Earl Campbell. And I know that the discriminatory policies of the culturally biased SAT program was the reason why there weren't many African American and Hispanic students benefiting from all the money that is poured into the University of Texas. Well, before Hopwood, there were 50 African American students at UT's law school. After Hopwood, there are 5. There are 5. Is that acceptable? Is that what race neutral and gender neutral and colorblind is supposed to produce? Is this justice? Are we crazy? Do we not understand? And not only do they do that, at the same time, they begin to erect superficial trick barriers in front of our eyes, you know, like they did with the Rodney King case and said, well, you know, Rodney King really wasn't beaten by the police. He was really resisting arrest and knocking his own head into the concrete senseless. Let us not be confused about what is going on in America and in our community today. Not only is that happening, at the same time, they make a move to eliminate state funding for historically black colleges and universities and say that to have a TSU is somehow discriminatory. To have a Mississippi State University is somehow discriminatory. That's the Fordyce case. It's proceeding through the federal courts right now. And it would basically eliminate state funding for all of the historically black colleges and universities. That's what we've got on the line. When we were finally able to use the Voting Rights Act to elect a handful of African Americans to Congress, and we got up to that magic threshold of 40, where there were enough African Americans in Congress to begin to impact federal congressional policy, what happened? The think tank went to work, and they filed lawsuits in all of the federal courts across the country saying that we had created unconstitutional, gerrymandered lines that really protected the interests and created a real possibility of electing African American and Hispanics to Congress in great numbers. Since we lost that case, we've been gradually chipping away, and that number has gone backwards. And the Congressional Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, the Women's Caucus, the Native Americans Caucus is much less effective in impacting federal policy now than they were before. That's really what's going on. Don't let anybody tell you it's about the Constitution. It's about the current political interpretation of the Constitution. The Constitution has been used as our ally and as our enemy depending on the politics of that moment. We just named Intercontinental Airport after President George Bush. Out of respect for the former president who calls Houston its home, we supported that. Well, George Bush is the president that gave us, instead of Thurgood Marshall, Clarence Thomas. His son, George Bush, the governor in Dallas, is trying to give us a tax bill that's going to tax the hell out of the middle income and poor people for the benefit of wealthier people. The governor, George Bush, with a voluntary program, has somehow not been able to find but a handful of African American and Hispanics to appoint to judgeships around the state and other high positions. That's the reality of what's going on. This is a political struggle. And in the midst of this political struggle to determine what values, what principles, and what kind of leadership is going to appoint people to state benches in the state of Texas, or the federal benches at the national level, or to municipal courts at the mayor's court, there begins to become some responsibility on the people who are in this room. If we don't band together, not just African Americans, but Anglos, Hispanics, Asians, and African Americans of inclusion, of diversity, in principle, and of conscience, and if we don't do some real work, you won't have a mayor like Bob Lanier. You'll have a mayor like Dave Wilson. You won't have a council member like Chris Bell. You'll have a council member like, we don't want to speak about any of our other colleagues today. Not today. Never let it said that Councilmember Boney did not have some grace. Let me close by trying to make it real plain. In the past 4 elections, the turnout in the African American community has been about 20 or 25%. That means that 75 to 80% of our people in our community are not voting. By virtue of that, we've gone from 4 African American council members to 3. And if we continue that path, because Councilmember Robinson is unfortunately term limited, Councilmember Gracie Sines is unfortunately term limited, as well as the mayor and Helen Huey, we may go to 2 African American council members, 2 Hispanic council members, and we don't know who may be the mayor. And we may go from what appears to be a progressive majority of council to a very regressive majority of council. Why register? Why vote? The difference is in the numbers. The difference is in the paychecks that are in your account. The difference is in the number of employees that you minority businesses are able to hire. The difference is in the opportunities that you have to really earn business. That's the time we're in and what must be done. And that's what we've got to do. A lot of you are going to give contributions to various political candidates. I want to challenge you to give some money to some nonpartisan organizing, voter registration, voter education, voter mobilization. Because if 80% of the people don't vote, it won't matter who you contribute to, because the one who is elected is going to be against everything that you support. So this is kind of an alarm clock going off. Houston has been able to stay together, to have unlimited potential and unparalleled opportunities. But the future is very, very, very much uncertain. And I want to challenge you in the deepest kind of way, to make sure that you're part of a mighty force, a mighty army that ensures that Houston grows and creates more opportunities for more of us in the future. Amen.